Welcome to Ladies Talking Love, Episode 7, Staying Connected Through Infertility. I loved hearing Erin's advice about staying connected with your spouse during hard times and also how to navigate some of those difficult situations that come up, like announcing that you're pregnant to a friend who's struggling with infertility. I know that everyone's journeys are different, especially around infertility, but I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did. It's Ladies Talking Love, a community of women uncovering more joy and fulfillment in sex as we learn from experts and amazing women like you. Together, let's create a world where women's sexuality is celebrated and understood, beginning with our own. I'm your host, Ariel Finlinson. Let's talk love. I'm so excited to welcome Erin Novak onto Ladies Talking Love today. She was originally born in Maryland, and then she lived in New Mexico and then Utah. She's currently living in Seattle, Washington. She's been married to her husband, Ryan, for 9 years, and they just welcomed their first baby girl into their family, who's 5 months old, after struggling with infertility for 5 years. Some of her hobbies are board games, reading, and hiking. I'm so excited to have you on the show today, Erin. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me here.
I feel like infertility is one of those struggles that a lot of times people don't talk about, or it can be hard to start the conversation about it. How did you kind of start to share your journey?
It took a long time to share my journey. Just as you said before, it took 5 years until I got pregnant with my daughter, Jillian. And it probably took me about 3 or 4 years into that journey where I actually started to open up and share it. Because it did feel isolating. It felt really lonely. And I just felt like I was carrying something that nobody knew about. And I would get all sorts of weird questions like, oh, when are you going to have kids? Do you even want kids? So that was really hard. It just felt like we were kind of being judged. Maybe people were looking at our lives and thinking, oh, well, they're just, they don't want to have kids. They just want to live this elaborate lifestyle or whatever it was. It was just hurtful to kind of have those opinions or, those comments said. So I remember making an Instagram post about it and deleting it and then writing it up again and then deleting it and just feeling really nervous about sharing it. But when I finally did share it, I was so surprised by how many people reached out to me and said, hey, I'm struggling with this too. I thought, it feels really lonely and I didn't realize that you were struggling with it as well, and found some friendship in that. And just felt like I wasn't alone, that this is something that other people struggle with. We just don't talk about it. And what a shame it is that people don't share this really hard thing that they go through. And having people reach out to me and say, I'm struggling with this too, and being able to cry with those people and pray for them and feel their prayers as well was really uplifting for me and really helped me to feel a little less alone in the journey.
In your journey, what was some harmful advice people gave you or things they said? But then on the flip side for you, what were some helpful reactions of people or even when you weren't sharing it, that probably just people not saying anything?
It is really hard because when you're struggling with infertility, you're kind of extra sensitive to any comments, whether people feel like they're being helpful or not, you're extra sensitive to them. I've had some really weird comments, such as a friend, not even knowing my situation, but just knowing that I've been married for maybe 4 years, 5 years, and seeing that I didn't have kids and how abnormal that was in our culture to not have kids and be married for so long. She reached out to me on Facebook and asked if I needed a surrogate. And, she's been thinking about it and she'd be more than happy to be my surrogate if I wanted it. And I was just dumbfounded. I was absolutely dumbfounded because I'd never talked to her about my infertility. I never shared anything about that. She had no idea where I was at in my journey. And for her to ask that was so invasive and so personal. And that was really awkward. It was really awkward. Yeah. But yeah, just things like that where, I've had friends bring it up at a wedding where I'm sitting around with a group of friends and out of nowhere, they're like, oh, so how's it going? Are you having babies yet? And it's just so awkward. I'm like, this is a happy time. And like this friend knew I was struggling with infertility, and to bring it up in this setting among people that didn't even know my story was really it was really embarrassing and really hurtful as well when I should be celebrating my friend's wedding, but to have this come up. Um, so I mean, all sorts of things. Or even I had another story too. I was sitting around with a group of girls. None of them knew I was struggling with infertility, and one of them had said, "Oh my gosh, like if I," she's like, "I have 4 kids, and if I was around anyone that was struggling with infertility, I don't think I could even talk to them because that would just be so awkward." And I was sitting
What?
there, it's like, you know nothing
Oh,
about the group of women you're with. Like and just to hear that was so hurtful because I'm like, oh my gosh, do people with kids, do they not want to be my friend? Like, because they feel awkward? And what a shame that is, because I just think of, like, you were my friend during that time, and I had other friends that had kids, and I was so grateful for those friendships where I can still interact with children and play with kids, because I love kids. I absolutely love babies. I love kids. And I just found so much joy in that. And to have somebody say, oh, I don't want to be, basically, like, I feel awkward, I don't know if I could be friends, that was so hurtful
that'd
as
be
someone
so
who was
hurtful.
struggling with infertility.
And it was such a blessing to have you as a friend. It didn't matter whether you had kids or not. What were some things that were helpful for you?
Something that was really helpful for me that my friends did was that they would still invite me to do things, my friends with kids, that they weren't afraid to be my friend, that they were welcoming into their homes, welcoming into their lives, letting me love on their little ones, letting me be a part of their life. That was so rewarding for me. Kind of felt like that was bridging that gap between infertility and motherhood, because it was so rewarding for me to still be a part of my friends' lives who have kids and to feel like I was still a part of their kids' lives as well. I was so appreciative of that. And so don't be afraid to reach out to your friends with infertility. Some people, of course, depending on where they are in their journey, that might be hard for them. But some people like me, I thrived off of that. I absolutely loved being a part of their lives and their kids' lives as well.
And on the flip side, where I haven't had that struggle, sometimes being around you, I would worry like, oh no, I'm saying I'm pregnant again, or I'm doing this. And I didn't want to hurt someone's feelings who is struggling. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a hard one because truly it was really hard to hear when you find out that your friends are pregnant. It was a struggle. It truly was. And I wish I could say, oh, no, it was totally fine. And no, I was just happy for you. But that's not the truth. The truth is,
Mhm.
it was painful and it was really hard to see everybody else having babies and you're still left behind and you're still wanting that for yourself and it's not happening. So, advice I would give, I wish I had advice. I think it's okay to cry and it's okay to feel sad about yourself. And I think friends that are pregnant and trying to approach that with love and kindness to their friends with infertility, one thing that I had a friend do, which was helpful, was text me beforehand, like before they announced it to everybody, and just said, hey, I just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. I love you, but I do want you to know I'm pregnant and I'm having a baby. But you mean a lot to me. And I wanted you to be aware of this beforehand. Just that little heads up was really helpful. It still hurt and I still bawled my eyes out when I received that text message. But it at least helps the person struggling with infertility, or at least for me, it helped me to kind of get it all out before I saw that person and to kind of feel happier for them. Um, Even if it was just a little bit, because I was able to process it instead of in my own privacy instead of in front of other people.
Which I think I've made that mistake to maybe announce it in person, which maybe for some people would be fine, but to give them that space alone, I think is a really great idea. And just to be able to acknowledge that there probably will be pain for them and that's okay, but you wanted to share what you was happening in your life, but acknowledging their pain as well. Kind of going into your relationship with Ryan, because there's so much stress around sex suddenly. It's like, okay, we're trying to get pregnant. Did your relationship with sex change when you as your journey through infertility went on?
I would have to say yes. Looking back, I think it definitely would have been different if we just were fertile, right? Like, I think that's just a natural process. And of course, it will change when you're struggling with infertility or if you're super fertile, right? Whatever is your story, that relationship will change. And for us, kind of what changed was now we were scheduling sex like, oh, I'm going to ovulate this day. So we have to make sure we have sex X amount of times right before ovulation. And we have to avoid this thing. We have to avoid that thing. Like there's just like a list. And so sometimes it felt like it wasn't for intimacy. It was more about business. We have to get it done. Everything has to go as planned. If it doesn't, we have failed. We messed up. Like we're not going to get pregnant. So there was a lot of pressure when it came to sex around ovulation and trying to get pregnant with that. There were definitely moments when it was really hard, especially for me. I had moments of doubt and feeling absolutely hopeless. I remember just telling Ryan, I was like, I don't know if this is ever going to happen for us. And he was always so positive. He really was a rock for me, where he really felt like we would have a baby. And so he was a huge source of strength for me and would comfort me when I was just feeling absolutely broken. And so that was really helpful to have his support. But I know one thing that really helped us was to make sure that we were being intimate other times throughout the cycle, where it wasn't just that week of ovulation, but that we were having sex outside of that window so we could just have fun with it and just play.
So how do you separate it? Because you talked about how sex was kind of like work in that time frame you're trying to get pregnant. How did you switch in between every cycle to enjoy sex and have it be something that's connecting and fun?
I feel like it came more natural, honestly, in between the cycle, just because there wasn't that pressure there. But when all of a sudden you have that narrow window, there's so much pressure, and that it does take away some of that play and spontaneity as well.
Mm-hmm.
But when that window's gone, you're like, oh, well, we're having sex for fun. Like we're not like there's no purpose aside from just mutual enjoyment at that point. So I felt like that part was easy. But it was always hard to switch over to be like, okay, now we have to, and we have to on this day and this day just to have a shot at a baby.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important mindset, that when you weren't trying to get pregnant, you were thinking like, this is about both of our enjoyment and it can just flow, which I think for some of us, that's even a struggle, just to remember that, like, oh yeah, this is just for fun. This is just for connecting and for mutual enjoyment. And I think you already sounded like you already had that kind of set up before you probably went into infertility. Would you say that relationship with sex?
Oh, definitely. And I think that was really helpful because I do know couples who struggle with that part. Like they'll only have that business time, right? That week of business time, but then don't make time during the rest of the cycle. And I think it's so important and so crucial to make time, not just during that window of opportunity, but all the time, because that really will help strengthen your relationship and help you be able to rely on each other when infertility is hard and when things are difficult. If you already have that relationship built up and you're making priority time for each other outside of that window, it was so helpful for us to have that time together and to just have it be us and not have that pressure.
You talked a little bit about some of those ups and downs of feeling broken. How did you work through those ups and downs? Because at least for me, my births sometimes are a lot harder than a lot of my friends. And that's been a really hard struggle for me, to compare myself and feel almost invalidated, that like something's wrong with my body. Like, why can't my body give birth as easily or as short as some of these friends of mine? How did you work through that? Because especially like thinking about our sexuality, a huge part of being able to be present and enjoy sex is accepting our bodies as they are. How did you work through some of those feelings of self-love that were probably hard at times to feel a little broken?
Absolutely. I absolutely felt broken. Um, Especially because within my fertility journey, I've experienced two miscarriages and they were both really quick. And I just could not help but feel absolutely broken inside with each miscarriage and just feeling like something wasn't working, or even again, just being diagnosed with PCOS and endometriosis, being so frustrated with my body that it wasn't working as it should. And especially the endometriosis, where I had a huge cyst on my ovary that was causing me constant pain, and knowing that that was a huge source of my infertility, and just feeling betrayed by my body. I really just felt that, and that was really hard. But some things I did to kind of take control of that was focusing on my nutrition, focusing on exercise, and really kind of developing a lifestyle that would allow me to be as healthy as I could be despite having PCOS and despite having endometriosis. That really helped me with my fertility journey, is really just focusing in on my health.
And did that help you feel more self-love and accept your body as it was because you were taking care of yourself the best way you could? How did that kind of switch your view?
Yeah, it definitely helped. I would love to say that it was magic and I always felt self-love after
There's
that, but
nothing
that's
like that
not
in
the
life.
truth. No, not at all. But it definitely increased my like feeling my self-value and feeling love and appreciation for my body when I really took care of it. And I actually remember telling Ryan before I was pregnant, um, just how grateful I was for infertility. And I was really surprised I said that because I really felt so grateful that I went down this avenue of a healthy lifestyle that I knew was going to benefit me for all my life. It wasn't just for the small moment, but it was going to be for all my life. And it was such a blessing that I discovered that. And I felt like infertility kind of gave that to me because it did make me kind of think about, all right, well, what can I do to help increase my fertility? And diet and exercise were two big ones that I felt like I had control over. And I'm so grateful that I created those healthy habits in my life because it did give me a lot more self-love and appreciation for what my body can do.
And in those moments of when you weren't feeling love for yourself, was it hard to accept love from Ryan? Like to believe, because I feel like, at least for me and experiences I've had, sometimes it's like, I know that my husband's love isn't based on if I have kids or not, or based on these like other things, since we're talking about infertility. That's the example I'll use. But I think for me, like when I can't do those things, it's like, oh no, he doesn't love me because I'm not able to, I don't know, clean my house as well or do whatever. How did you work through some of those feelings?
Naturally, you're going to doubt yourself and feel less than or feel like, oh, well, you could have married somebody that didn't have infertility and could have given you what you wanted. You could have had children by now, and I can't give that to you. And that was hard. Um, but for me, honestly, I'm just married to a really great guy. He's so great and he's so patient and he just really affirmed his love for me and how much he loved being with me. And again, his positive view that we're going to have kids, it's going to work out. And he just never doubted. And that helped strengthen me and help me to kind of overcome those feelings of that I'm not enough because I had that hope. He would help give me that hope at times when I just felt devastated that it was going to work. Maybe it wasn't in the timetable that we were hoping for, but it would eventually work out.
And so, even besides intimacy, staying connected is a really important part of any relationship, but especially going through infertility, I feel like that would be a huge struggle. How do you stay connected outside of sex?
For us, that worked really well is just having goals that we set. Every week, my husband and I, we sit down and we think about what we want to achieve during the coming week or even within the coming months, and we make little goals for that. And so that accountability every week of talking about our goals, what we did that week for our goals, what we want to happen in the future, I think that really brought us together and helped give us something else to focus on than just having a baby. Because as great as babies are, we love our little baby now that we have one and she's just our world. But it was so great for us to have other goals and work towards those. And it really did connect us better as a couple and help better us as people and individuals as well.
Did you find goals that you usually did together, or were they like individual goals and you would talk about them?
We would do both. So we would set goals together. We would have um, a little planning session, talk about maybe what kind of social goals we want to make for the week, or what do we want to learn about, exercise goals, just all sorts of different goals that we would set together. And then we would also take some time and talk about our personal goals. And we would write it all down and stick it on our fridge so we can see it throughout the week. And then the following week, we can kind of take it off the fridge, read over it, and talk about what we accomplished and what we could have done better on. Um, but it was great knowing what my husband's personal goals were as well, so I can help encourage him on and vice versa. because I had a goal where I wanted to write a child's book off of a character that my grandpa created. That is this little dog that went on these adventures. And I've always wanted to write a children's book about it and give it as a gift to my grandma because my grandpa passed away about 6 years ago. And so I had this goal, but my grandma's 92. She's getting old. And so Ryan was a huge advocate for me and saying, hey, Erin, you need to get this done. This needs to happen. Take some time today, take an hour or half hour, whatever, and write it. So he really helped push me towards my goals because we had that discussion at the beginning of the week, what I wanted to accomplish. So he really helped me get there because I did finally finish my story and give it to my grandma this last Christmas.
Awesome.
And it was so rewarding. But I wouldn't have had that if we didn't take the time to sit down and talk about our goals.
And he wouldn't have been able to help you make time. Because I found that even after having kids, I feel like it's even more important when Kyle knows, oh, Ariel's needing to work on this. I'm going to take care of the kids during this time. And then I can maybe help him with something he's working on to give each other time, because time is a commodity that seems to get shorter and shorter as we get older.
Absolutely.
And then with your goals as a couple, were those usually things that you did together as well?
Yeah. So most of the time it'd be goals that we would focus on together. So for example, we would have, maybe we would want to learn about something, whether it be something in relation to health and fitness or outer space. It didn't matter. We both would take turns and find podcasts, and then we would listen to the podcast and do something on the side, like paint or whatever. We'd do something together and listen to the podcast, and we'd have discussions about it and talk about it. So we did do a lot of things like that. Or even, okay, we want to make sure that we go on walks twice a day just to get out in the fresh air and enjoy the sunshine. And so we would go on these walks twice a day, which was really fun because we would do that together. So we would get to just talk. That'd be like uninterrupted time together where we weren't on our phones, we weren't distracted by anything, but we could just talk. And so I really enjoyed that as well. But I really felt like those things really brought us close together and continues to bring us close together because we are constantly working on something as a team, but also rooting each other on individually with our personal goals.
Have you continued that tradition of goals since having your baby as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, that is amazing. And I feel like before we had kids, or even sometimes when our kids are at grandma's house or something, we don't spend very much time together unless we're intentional about it. And so I love that your goals and your couple goals helped you be intentional about spending time together, which for me, at least, if I'm not intentional, it doesn't happen. Even if I am intentional, sometimes it doesn't happen. So I got to be intentional.
And the same thing goes for infertility as well. You have to be intentional about your relationship, or it can just totally eat you inside and you just kind of become a shell of a person. And I felt like there are many times when it would be just really easy to just fall into that and just become disconnected from my spouse and just kind of be in despair and not want to do anything. And so it was really great to have some other things to focus on than just having a baby, because that can be just so consuming, where it was so nice to be able to divert my attention onto other things. And it really helped us build our marriage because we were building our lives together, even though the baby wasn't happening quite yet.
And with being intentional with some of those goals, I know for me, sometimes I'll sit down to plan and I have all these good intentions to be intentional, but I have no ideas. Did you and Ryan ever face that? What did you do to kind of think about things to do if you were drawing a blank?
Yeah, so we usually have 4 different categories that we make goals in. And so sometimes there were the categories where we would stare at it, be like, okay, what goal are we going to make in this category? And we just stare at it. And if that happened, if we just didn't have anything, we would just skip it and not worry about it and focus on other things. That's just what worked for us. We didn't want to force anything, because if you force something, then you're not going to have fun doing it and it's not going to happen. You have to be excited about it and actually have something you want to work towards. So that's personally what we did.
That sounds great, especially because I can be an all or nothing person. So I'm like, I failed if I didn't do it, but that's so good to give yourself room. What were the 4 categories?
So it's physical, social, intellectual, and spiritual. So those are the 4 areas that we make goals under.
And you do it every week and maybe some long-term ones.
Every week if we can help it, but we do skip weeks. there because again, not
We're
perfect,
human.
right? Yeah. But yeah, we try to at least sit down once a week, or at least, if that doesn't happen, definitely once a month, and we sit down and talk about our goals and talk about what we have coming up in the week and make plans. And
did you have some of those goals that you do together? I loved the idea of like the podcast and listen, or like painting or something. Did you do dates outside of those things as well? Or did those kind of count as because you were spending time together and doing something together?
so we are the worst at doing dates. I know some couples are like, oh, you have to go on a weekly date all the time. And we just don't, because we're always spending time together, where it's, my husband made the comment once. He said, it's like we're always on a date. It's always just us two. And we're always just going out and doing things. It's like a date. Like, why is it different than going out another night? Which I get it, but also sometimes a girl likes to, have that time planned and set aside. So we're not very intentional about dates, and we can definitely be better at that. But we are definitely intentional about spending time together, even if it doesn't have the label as a date.
Sometimes a date makes me spend time with Kyle because I leave my house and I'm not as good at the intentional, like, we're at home, let's do this podcast or this art thing or whatever together. And so I love that you're able to be intentional, even if it's not per se date. But I can understand wanting to go out every once in a while together. As we are kind of getting to the close of this interview, I was just wondering if you have any final thoughts or things that you'd like to share with couples struggling through infertility.
I think it's really important in this day and age where we look at social media and we see these picture perfect lives, to realize that everybody has a story. Everyone has something that's hard in their lives. And even though it looks like they're having a great time, and they might be, and that's fantastic, but they're still struggling with something, or have struggled with something, or will struggle with something in the future. And I think it's so important to not be afraid to share those struggles with people and to be open. Sometimes the journey feels so isolating, whether it be infertility or any other problem. But I think we would all be surprised by how many people are struggling with the same things we have if we're open and honest with it. I really am grateful that I opened up with people and have shared my struggles with infertility, because I feel like people who don't understand that struggle can ask me questions or learn a little bit more about it, and have a little bit more empathy for people who do struggle with infertility, but also just creating that community and finding help when you're finding other people with the same struggles, that we can lean on each other and find support.
I think all of us can learn things from your experience. And I'm so grateful that you took your time to come and share some of your story with us. Thanks so much for joining me today, Erin.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed Erin's thoughts about separating the sex you're having to get pregnant from sex in between, just to connect and be together. I loved her thoughts about being intentional about spending time together as a couple and working on goals. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode as well. And if this podcast has been helpful for you and you've enjoyed it, I would love it if you could go and leave a review. Thanks for talking love. Join the conversation at ladies.talkinglove on Instagram and tag your friends who would like to participate. You can also check out our website, ladiestalkinglove.com, where you can access each episode and join our exclusive newsletter. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Instagram or by email to hello@ladiestalkinglove.com as we learn together. Thanks for talking love.